Hey everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we're going to be talking about silver rounds, which is one of the main ways that people invest in silver. There are a lot of advantages to using them, and we're going to be kind of doing an in-depth discussion on what those look like, also kind of cover some of the drawbacks, but it's also going to be accompanied. We're going to be starting out. SDBullion.com is sponsoring this video. They've sent me some silver rounds to unbox, and just so that you get a good picture of what an actual order might look like, some of the different designs, because the variety of designs, we'll talk about this, is one of the advantages, but SDBullion.com is a great place to purchase silver. They have a very wide assortment beyond silver rounds, but anyways, we'll be using this as kind of a starting point to show you what they look like, and then after that we'll get into a detailed discussion of pretty much all of the pros. Some of them are kind of the main reason to go with silver rounds, why so many people do. Others are kind of slight bonuses where it could make it more interesting, but with silver being such a trending topic, really want to make this video, so let's get right into it with that unboxing. And here we have it. I've attempted somewhat of a silver background back there with the types that are not going to be unboxed, but I'm just going to tear this open and I'll show you these rounds. I'm really excited to see what they sent me. And here we have the package, SD Bearing Supplies. Not sure if they want to show that address, so I'm just going to kind of close it for now, but going to get to the bottom of it and see these rounds in the flesh. And I promise I've not seen them in person yet, so there we go. Pull back the curtain, so to speak, and we have an SD Bullion 1 troy ounce. I'm going to take these out of the plastic. We have another design back here, Sunshine Minting. That's one of the more common, well-known third-party mints. We've also got a Buffalo nickel type design. And finally, wow, that's a really cool looking coin. It looks like an Aztec pattern. And yeah, that has the Quahuatamoc. That looks very familiar. I think that design is featured on some of the Mexican coinage as well. But I'm going to take these out of the plastic, but immediately we're going to get into our first our first main attraction to the silver round. And I don't think that it's the best thing about the silver round. There's one that's even more important in my opinion, but it's obvious there's so many different cool designs out there. So there's lots of different strikes that you can have. There's not any restriction by governments where they'll make them and they'll sell them way above premium just because they have the government stamp. Get into that a bit more in a second, but there's rounds for pretty much everything. This one, really neat. You can have a proof strike round, nice contrast, cameo contrast. I think that looks really pretty. Has an awesome Liberty Freedom with an eagle on it. Same thing here, Sunshine Minting. Kind of has a proof reflective. You can see my head a little bit in the reflection, but the potential for designs is quite literally limitless, and there's all sorts of different ones. I'd never seen this one before. I had been familiar with this. This is a little more traditional of a design, but this is just 4 of them, and there's a lot more out there. But just to show you, that's one of the big things. Lots of customizability within the silver rounds. Now, I'm not really a big fan of trying to beat around the bush, and I think the main attraction to silver rounds is going to be how cheaply you can acquire them. Like I said before, there's a lot of different types of silver with very high premiums, and that can be fun if you're trying to collect certain designs, but there's a lot of designs available at a very low price above melt value. So, maybe silver eagles are selling for $10 over a spot. There have been some pretty crazy swings recently. The silver rounds are going to be much, much less expensive when compared to a silver eagle, or even a lot of the different government bullion that's not silver eagles, like Canadian maple leaves and Australian kangaroos. All sorts of other sources of silver, really, and forget about it. I mean, I have some coins back here. The Morgan dollar, this one's really beat up, but will sell at a significant premium above its silver content. The only thing that is comparable is maybe something like this, a 1967 40% silver, low percentage silver coinage, but there's some pretty big drawbacks because here, this is a silver focused coin. You get a lot of the premium back when you sell it, and there's not too much premiums. So basically, you're really just getting a very solid source of silver, especially when you go through a site like SD Bullion or have rounds made Sunshine Mint, another great source, whereas people don't really want to pay when you go to sell for 40% silver coins. There's certainly buyers for them, but you often have to sell, at least in my experience, at a significant discount to the spot value, whereas with something like this, with a round, you're not going to have that problem really whatsoever. You're always going to be able to sell it for 1 ounce of silver because it's just a more quantifiable investment. When you look on the back, 999 fine silver, 1 ounce. Here, I think I know, a reasonable, I should actually know it better, but few people know exactly what the inherent silver content is of a $0.50, especially a 40% one, and it's not as divisible. Here, you have 1 ounce of silver, you know exactly what you have, and that's a really big reason that people like silver rounds. I talked about it before, but another reason that you really want to consider the silver round is because the higher purities that are involved just make it so easy to know what you have. I'm kind of repeating myself with this, but it's 999 fine silver. They're generally going to come in 1 troy ounce forms, and they're also have that advantage that they're not huge amounts of silver. So another lower premium option is often 10 or especially 100 and 1,000 ounce bars, but the 1 ounce is not a very, very expensive purchase. You can make a purchase and kind of have low premium, but still getting a very plain and explainable amount of silver, as opposed, like I just mentioned, with some of the constitutional or junk silver. And they're also easy to split apart. So the bar, 100 ounces, you can't really, say you buy a 100 ounce bar, either you're selling the whole bar or you're not. 100 silver rounds, say you think silver has gone a little bit too high, you might be able to sell 50 of them, but you can still keep 50 to hold on to. Or say you want to, trade it in for a 10 ounce bar, that's cool. You have that divisibility, maybe in some sort of prepping scenario, or more likely just a scenario where you might need cash really quickly. Again, you're not having to sell that whole 100 ounce bar. Maybe the person doesn't really want it as much, and you have to take more of a loss than if you can just sell a more specific amount to get exactly the cash or the thing that you're trading for at a fair value to both you and the person who's accepting the payment. Another notable part to the silver rounds that sometimes people kind of look over is that many silver rounds actually trade to a premium of their silver content or kind of the general quote on a 1 ounce silver round. Often people really like a design, it becomes a little bit more rare, and there can be some upside. I feel like people don't think about that quite as much, and personally, I wouldn't have that be a main driver for what I'm purchasing, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. Not every silver round is just worth the low premium that it was acquired for. Sometimes people make them kind of artificially scarce, but often, if it's a cool design, especially if it's older, there can be some hidden gems in there that you probably want to know about. There's also potential. I've seen some really toned, kind of beautiful rainbow toned silver rounds. It's still silver, so it will tone as time goes on. And I just think that there's, between toning and really cool rounds, the design, again, like I mentioned, that's not an extra cost in the beginning, but it can help get a little bit beyond the silver value when you look to sell. So definitely a phenomenon that I wouldn't want to not mention. So before we get into the short list of drawbacks or considerations, I do just want to encourage you to purchase from a well-known provider on the silver rounds, because it's not like, there's plenty of fake American Silver Eagles, but it's not like there aren't fakes out there. So it's just important, sdbullion.com, like I said, they're sponsoring the video, but they're a good place to do it. You just want to make sure that you have somebody that's trustworthy and reliable with any silver. But I think that rounds, they're not backed by government. People are faking American Silver Eagles and other government bullion for sure, but there is that slight element of question. So having a good source can go a long way in kind of ensuring the value and keeping you with a peace of mind. Now, in terms of some of the cons, I don't even know if they're like real cons, but they might be kind of areas where you might lose out or just something to think about. So, I mean, with these 4 coins, like I said, there's potential for an increase in value over the spot price. You know, certainly right now where there's kind of a physical gap between the physical silver prices and what you can buy an online share of silver for. But with the cost of probably acquiring them cheaper than a lot of that government rounds, you're not going to get quite as much in terms of a premium over when you go back to sell it. Now, you may get the same amount. Say you pay $6 over for silver, then you sell it for $4 versus, $4 over to a dealer versus buying something like this for maybe $3 or $4 over spot, and then you sell it back to a dealer for $2. That's the same amount of premium, but there's probably, the same difference, but there's not going to probably be quite as much of that. There's also less of a secondary market when selling them, in my experience. I feel like people are more quick to purchase something like an American Silver Eagle over a silver round, just in terms of the quantifiability and how known they are. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I know, this round better than I do some of the other silver forms, even, junk silver, like the 40% or 90%. But I think that those are really just the things to think about. And they're not really too significant in terms of the drawbacks. But again, that's really what I see when I'm talking about silver rounds. Perhaps there's somebody who doesn't feel comfortable purchasing these, or they think that they might be fake just because that there's kind of less of an assurance. But that's really more in a quick situation with a very limited number of people. Most silver stackers, in my opinion, or kind of in my experience, have quite a lot in the rounds as well as bars. Both of those are not made by a government, but that, the government assurance doesn't really do a ton, just maybe for some of the newer investors. And that's why I really like silver rounds, because they're just, they aren't a huge, it's like they get the job done. You want somebody who's reliable when you have an important job to do. And, if there's no reason to overpay if they're going to do the same job as somebody, a different contractor who's going to do a, more expensive job. And maybe they have a little more pedigree. But at the end of the day, if you know the job's going to get done the same way, why pay more for it? And that's what I like about silver rounds, kind of as an analogy to round out the video. Thanks again to SD Bullion for sponsoring this, and I'll look forward to discussing some of the other types of silver in the future.